Welcome, everybody. It's the appointed hour, so we'll get our sewer summit started. It's been a few years since we've had one of these, so we're glad to get back to this and glad to get back to it in person, but also with now the expanded capability of inviting those from the further regions of the state to join us online. We've got a good program for you today as we move along. And if you need to get onto our Wi-Fi, the information is right over here. Refreshments are drinks are in back, and we'll have lunch a little bit later. We invite your comments and suggestions and any recommendations on future topics as well as we go. We appreciate that you're here and want you to appreciate the fact that you're here to learn from the trust, but you are experts in what you do. And today and throughout the year, if you have questions, you want to bounce ideas, you should use each other as a resource. We're all in this together to make this state a great state. And so we can work together to make our operations better and certainly from a trust perspective, safer and with less risk for everybody. So welcome and thanks for coming. And I'll turn the time over to Jason to get us going.
Thank you, Jeff. I really appreciate you your introduction there, and we appreciate Jeff's leadership here. He's the director over both claims and loss prevention here at the Trust, and we appreciate all the things that he does. Really tie those two sides of what we do together because they really do marry that way. Thank you for coming today. We have a pretty good sized group. I didn't see the numbers, but we had a pretty good sized number that is joining us on Zoom. I'm not going to stand at the lectern because it bothers me. So I'll move around, and so I apologize to those of you on Zoom if Mike has to chase me around with the camera. I'll try to stay in one spot. It's been a while since we've done a sewer summit, and this has been one of those things that we've traditionally done every year, and COVID kind of got in the way of the sewer summits. We did some webinars, things like that to talk about sewer, but we think this is one of those key exposures that you have out there in your operations. It's something that can, really impact our community. Nothing impacts your life more than having your basement full of raw sewage. And that's our major focus coming from the Trust. But we know you have a lot of other things that you do in regards to sewer collection. And we try to work with you on your safety programs as well as auto and all of those things. But today we really want to talk about sewer. Each year we do a sewer survey, and so we're going to talk to you about what we got from the 120 members of the Trust that have sewer collection systems. We also have a great opportunity to hear from Jen Robinson from the state, from Department of Water Quality. Talk to us about what's going on from a regulatory standpoint. There's big changes that are happening now, so we're excited to hear from Jen. I will move on here, and just folks, if you happen to be on Zoom, Mike sent out a chat there. But if you have questions or comments there, please type those into the chat box. And for some reason, my clicker is not working. Let's see if we can make this work. There we go. You know what? My audio is not going through the. Mike's going to tell me that you can't use audio. I think I'm okay without audio. So that's our program for the day. We're excited to have you here. I got the microphone on and I put the sport coat on, but this is an interactive session. We'd love to hear your comments and questions and thoughts about these things. So feel free to ask those questions. These are challenging times right now. I wanted to lead into it with this. In the world of risk, it's challenging. Back in the 70s, early 70s, we had a time similar to this. I got a little feedback, Mike. Is that on my machine? You got it? Okay. Back in the 70s, it was a challenging time for local government agents. All across the country, private insurers said, we don't want to touch government risk, bad risk, and we really don't want to. We don't want to get into that because we're going to have big losses. And so all across the country, organizations like Utah Local Governments Trust were formed by legislature. That's when we came about, 1974. The legislature said, our local government agencies, cities, towns, districts, counties, need an option to be able to protect themselves. So let's give them an option to pool their resources together. Well, we find ourselves in 2022 in another similar market. Think about the stories that you see on news, some of the lawsuits and the awards that are given both in the trust and outside of the trust in the state and all across the country. You think of the footage that we see of law enforcement liability. What insurance company in their right mind would want to insure a police agency now? Well, that's what we're here for. That's our job, is to do that. And also our job in the trust is to help you prevent losses. That's our number one goal. Yep, we're going to pay your claims and all of those things go along with the insurance side of that. But at the end of the day, we want all of your people to go home safe at the end of the day, and we don't want you to get sued. We don't want you to lose money based on that, and we want to work together for those things. So we find ourselves at an interesting juncture where it's a hard insurance market. That means premiums are going up all over. Well, how does that impact the trust? This is not an insurance lecture, sorry. This is just telling you where we're at. The trust is able to buffer a lot of that, but we have exposure to reinsurance market, and so we can get hit from that. So all of that said, why did I bring up all of the insurance stuff? Because for us to be able to control our costs, we need to be able to control our loss and control our risk. And traditionally, sewer losses, backups, overflows, whatever terminology you want to use, have been one of our major forms of loss. Auto, sewer were traditionally our number one and number two cause of loss for many, many years. And shortly after I started working at the trust, probably about 13 years ago, we pulled together a group of organizations that collected sewer, right? That were sewer own collection system. And we said, how do we get on top of this? We were paying out about $1 million per year in sewer claims, backups into people's basements. That was a lot of money and dozens of claims. And the impact on people's lives and our communities was real. And we sat back and we said, you know what, we're just some risk managers sitting in here. We don't know everything there is to know about sewer collection and how we make these things go away. So we brought in the experts. Brad, I think you were here, weren't you? I think he was in on that meeting. And we said, tell us. We brought in lunch and we sat around a table and we said, tell us, how do we prevent these backups? And the meeting lasted about 5 minutes before we had our answer, and then we ate lunch. We went on. We instituted a program of inspection, just really looking at your system, and we're able to get ahead of those backups, and we were able to knock those down. To some years, we were a tenth of the dollar amount that we had spent on sewer losses, and it had been really good. Until recently, and recently we've kind of seen it going the wrong way, where we've had some significant losses in the sewer world. In general, we would look at it and go, most of our members are doing pretty well, but when a backup happens, sometimes they're ginormous. And with the cost of property these days, and with high value finished basements, that can really impact what our cost is. Say, well, the insurance is paying that. Well, the reality is we all pay that. And the trust is an organization. We pool our resources together. You pay us premium. But if you go a year and nobody has backups, and we don't have other types of losses, we can give that money back to you. And so our goal is to get our losses down to the point where your premiums are down and we're giving money back every year. That would be the best possible scenario. But as we face these challenges Think about that as we go into it. I wasn't going to spend quite that much time on that intro slide. COVID, I think, threw a lot of monkey wrenches into everything that we did. We all know that, but I think it also had some major impacts on our sewer collection system. Let's move on. Claim performance. This is just kind of a graphic of what we've done over time and where we're at. Now that last line, that's 2022, so you only have basically half a year on there, so you can see what track that we're on. Probably pretty good. About claim cost. Well, that's where I say we had some rough years. 2018 was altogether the very worst year that the trust has ever had as far as losses, and it came across all of the lines of coverage. But we saw some significant sewer losses during those years as well. You know me, I have to throw a few videos in here. Are you happy you're here today? Not that guy doing that job? Ooh. All right. So let's take a look at our sewer survey. Each year, we send out a survey to all of the members who own and operate a collection system, and we ask you a bunch of questions, and you get tired of answering the same questions over and over, year over year. How many miles of pipe do you have? How many lift stations do you have? Those types of things. But over the years, we've seen this survey really tell a story of how we're doing as a group in the state of Utah. And so this last year, just one highlight. Whoops, I think I did something wrong. One highlight from this last year's survey, the actual collection of the survey, is Mike Stagg back in the back of the room. We appreciate Mike so much. He works in loss prevention with us, but he's also a tech genius, tech guru, and he developed a way that we could have you submit your survey online. I know that's not genius level status, but for me it would be. And it made it a lot easier. And guess what? We got a lot more surveys in a lot quicker this year. And so that's just one highlight from that. We have about 120 members who own and collect a sewer or own and operate a sewer collection system. Vast majority of those submitted responses. And then the data that we look at in here, we look at kind of 5-year average when it comes to sewer loss data. Why would we take 5 years? Well, sewer is the long game, right? Generally, the things that you do, your maintenance programs, the problems that happen in sewers, that's not an immediate thing that's happening all the time. It's not like an auto crash, auto losses, where they're fairly regular and we see that. And so when we take this data, we try to spread it out over about 5 years so we can really see where our trends are going. Over those 5 years, 78 members had a claim. Doesn't mean that they had dollars associated with that claim, but they had a sewer claim during that time. 42 of those members had no claims in 5 years. Congratulations to those of you out there in that category. And some of you may say, "Oh, that was a really small system," or things like that. That's not true. We have some very large organizations, districts, large cities that had no claims during a 5-year period. So good job on that. 2021, last year we had 34 sewer claims. We average about 41 claims per year over that 5-year time. Okay. One thing that I was going to put on here, and I spaced it off until just now, but we have a trend where we're trending far more towards no-fault claim. Tell me what a no-fault claim is. Got an idea? Jeff can tell me what a no-fault claim is. I'm going to bring the microphone over to you. Okay.
So I've been handling claims for almost 30 years now for public entities, and sewer claims are often the ugliest. but it really is fairly rare that the entity that runs the sewer system ends up being responsible for them. And yet you've got somebody whose house, their basement, sometimes their yard has been flooded with sewage, and they're just left in a terrible spot. And so the trust policy provides uh, no fault coverage of up to $5,000 per household on an uninsured basis of coverage for cleanup, for remediation, all of that in your policy. So you're not at fault, but they make a claim. If they don't have any insurance on that, you'll have the full 5,000. If they do have insurance on it, then the trust will step in and pay their out of pocket, or in other words, their deductible on their insurance for the cleanup and for the restoration of their basement. It's a great tool. Sometimes it comes back to bite because people say, well, if you could pay 5,000, why aren't you paying for the whole thing? But so we try to explain to them that if it wasn't for this, we would pay nothing and you'd be left holding the bag. But people generally really appreciate that. But I wanted to talk for just a minute about a situation that came up last year that is outside of the claim numbers that Jason is reporting. Just like this August, a lot of the state last year experienced some severe weather events, heavy rain. And some of the communities that we insure had so much rain that it surcharged the sewer systems and backed up into homes. In one community, 1/10 of the entire population of that city had sewage in their basement, huge amount. The coverage that's provided to you as members is $5,000 per household, $100,000 per year. And this member decided that they wanted to use that whole $100,000 in this event. And so even though the city wasn't responsible, it was just this crazy 500-year storm event that caused this to happen. But within a day, we were able to put up a statement that the city put on their website. We put up a claim form so that people could go online and list who they were, what their damages were, and supply us with documentation of their insurance and the damages that they had. There were more claims than we had money for, but we were able to apportion it down, and so that everybody that submitted a claim where sewage came up out of the sewage pipes got at least a certain percentage of the damages they claimed. And that helped the city really save face and help a huge swath of their population in a pretty dire situation. So wanted you to know that that is available to you. And now that you know about it, let's hope that it never happens in your communities that way. But it's just one tool that we have to help you. First, the no fault on the one-off and two-off situations. But if you have something catastrophic like that that's out of your control, it can apply to that as well. Thanks, Jason.
Thanks so much, Jeff. Really appreciate that. And just kind of in tandem with the work that you do to prevent those backups, Jeff's working on the other end to reduce those claims, the payouts that we make. If we owe it, we pay it. But if we don't, he's aggressively trying to defend those claims. And we've seen that, and that was really the point I wanted to get across, is we've seen a major change away from just paying out liability on these things to no fault, because we've been able to aggressively defend those claims. So thanks, Jeff. A couple other charts here, and we'll move quickly through these. But just as you receive your sewer surveys, you guys that are here in the room have those. Everybody else that's on Zoom will get those emailed to them, and you guys in the room will get an email as well. But we'll send those out later today via email. We try to normalize our data. So we have really large organizations. South Valley Sewer District, one of the largest in the state. Are you the largest? Close to the largest collection system in the state. And then we have one-horse towns, very, very small organizations, and that have maybe 100 or 300 manholes in their entire system. And so we try to normalize that data so you compare yourself to others. And we do that based on several factors. One is per 1,000 connections, and the other is per mile of pipe. And so as we look at those numbers, just keep that in mind. They're normalized to those factors that we felt were a good way to compare apples to apples. All right, backups. Oh. Let's look at some trends here. As we look at our claims, what are the things that are impacting? Why are we having these backups or overflows in our system? Flushable wipes are probably number one that comes up on our list, where people are just using these where we haven't used them in the past. They're using them inappropriately and flushing things that they shouldn't be. Foreign objects, grease, and we'll see those really come in spurts. And as we look close, when we see grease issues, generally that system may not have a FOG program in place, FOG program. Lift station failures. We'll talk about numbers here in a minute on lift stations, construction, contractors. With the amount of construction that we have, contractors are one of our biggest problems with backups. They dump a pile of gravel out in the street, and they've got a loader picking it up, and they pop a manhole lid off. Whether it's intentional or not, it happens, and gravel goes in, and they look in there, not going to get that out. They put the lid back on. Nobody hears about it until we have a backup down the road. That's the reason why inspection is so important. Roots, debris over time. Here are a few examples that came up. Old systems where we had damage to the system. Sometimes that could be, parts will be crushed. Sometimes complete pipes will just fail. They've corroded away due to hydrogen sulfide or acids or whatever it may be in there, and the old concrete pipe collapses. And once again, contractors. Sometimes the public is a big part of our sewer losses. How many claims a year do we have for manhole lids, Jeff? Just off the top of your head.
Oh, we probably have a dozen more. KSL is a story on one.
Yeah, another part of it. Not necessarily our focus today. All right, so let's talk sewer survey results. This is what your survey is going to look like. Only it'll have your data on there. We have the trust average data, and you can compare that to yours. So we have about 16,000, just under 16,000 miles of pipe, just under 500,000 connections total for everybody that was surveyed. 27,000 commercial and industrial connections. That seemed like a really large number in my mind, but apparently that's where we're at. 358 lift stations. Interesting sideline on this. One system has 99 of those. Anybody guess where that is? 99 lift stations. I'm not sure if they're on today. It's Bear Lake. Why would that be? Lake homes all the way around, and you're at the lowest level, and there are lift stations everywhere up there. Okay, about 164,000 manholes in the survey that we conducted. Of those manholes, we had about 73% of those were inspected in the past year. That's pretty good. That's not our goal. Our goal is 100% of all of those being inspected each year. Just so, because that's the program that we found that really works. Is if we know what's going on in the system, then we'll take the appropriate steps to correct it. Just under half of our members, and this was actually a trend going the wrong way. Just under half of our members had 100% manhole inspection during the year. It's taking us an average of 2.3 years to inspect all of our manholes. When you look at the whole system and the way everybody's reporting. Okay, generally we're going the right way. There are a few things that are going the wrong way. Average sewer cleaning frequency. This has consistently gone down from year to year since we started doing the survey and doing these sewer summits over the years. So we're at 3.36 years to get through the entire system. Some are doing 100% of their system every year. They're getting through the entire system cleaning. And there was one out there that was 15 years. What does that do to a risk manager? I twitch just a little bit when I think of 15-year cleaning frequency. Okay. We have about 17 of our members that do 17 of the 120 do 100% cleaning of their system. They get through the entire system every year. Okay. Generally, we're going the wrong way on this. We're a little bit better on our frequency, but we see a few systems out there that have kind of backed off on their cleaning frequency. And you'll see that in your own data where you're at. Who is doing the cleaning? I hope you guys are interested in this kind of stuff. I think if I were working in your world, that this would be interesting. About 44% of you are doing your own cleaning. 56% are using contractors. Does that surprise you? About right. Didn't put this on the slide. We actually asked which contractor are you using? Which one's doing the most? Wasn't even close. Twin D was far and above the one. Not a plug or anything like that, just the information that we got from there. Okay. It seems that we're shifting more and more towards contractors as we look at the data over the years, what's happened in our sewer survey. Okay. About 75% of our agencies with a collection system have equipment, jet truck, back truck, those things to respond to a backup. Okay. And that's going the right way. This one's changed a lot, and Jen's going to talk about this today, I'm sure. But when we started this, I was looking back at some older data, 2014. We had about 39% had submitted an NOI that they had a sanitary sewer management plan in place. Now we're at 90%. Jen's worried about the 10% that we don't have done. We need to do that because federal EPA's got their eyes on that kind of stuff, and I won't steal any thunder there. But it's important that we do that. How important is your sanitary sewer management plan? It's as important as you make it. If you will adopt a plan and live by it, it will improve your operations. You will prevent overflows that way. About 40% have a pre-treatment program, 80% have an FOG, a fog program for fast oils and greases, and the average is about 5.5 years to video the entire system, PV the entire system. Okay. And this is a new trend. About a third of our members are using acoustic inspection for their systems. We don't give guidance one way or another, but we're tracking that very closely to see how acoustic does as compared to other types of inspections. I thought you'd respond to that one just a little bit more. All right. So your report cards also include your loss performance. If you look at the right-hand side of your report card, it will give your loss performance as well. So if you've had a claim, whether there's dollars associated with it or not, you'll see some numbers there. Now you may see NA or zeros in some of those numbers. That means you didn't have a loss. Okay? You compare how you stack up, and that's really where we're using those numbers: claims per 100 miles of pipe, claim cost per mile of pipe, claims per 1,000 connections, and claim cost per connection. Those are things that you can use to really say, how are we doing compared to everybody else? And that will give you an idea of maybe the type of work that we need to do on our system or our maintenance program. Seems to be a trend. Okay, so how do we prevent overflow? I'm using backups and overflows interchangeably because in the insurance world we talk about backups. In the regulatory world we talk about overflows. And so I want to make sure that we're talking about the same things. it's the same thing. Backs up in somebody's basement, overflows the manhole. All of those things are counted similarly. But when we talk backups, they're generally ones where there is some exposure to your organization. Whether we own the liability or not, there's at least some exposure there. So how do we prevent those things? Number one, know your system. Know what's going on in your system. How old is it? What type of materials was it made out of? When was that installed? Know where your system is. Tapping. We need to know where all those manholes are. I can't tell you how many times I've seen a sewer claim come in. We didn't know this manhole was there, or it was a complete separate line that went out through a farmer's field somewhere, and we didn't know it was there, and it plugged, and we had a backup from it. Those are 100% preventable if we will really know what our system is. And I know some of that's hard. You come in new, and you don't have a GIS system, or it's an old system that's been around for a long time. I want to make sure that we are doing that, and we're inspecting our system. If we don't know what is in there, unless we flip the lid and we look at what is inside of that manhole, that's one of the most important things that we can do as an organization, is just know what's going on. Because at that point we go, oh, there's a bunch of gravel in there. We know what to do next. We can do our cleaning, we can do the appropriate things there, but we've got to know what's going on. As you came in today, we had these manhole inspection manuals there, and we'll email those out to everybody that's on Zoom. This is a great program. We're not taking credit for it, though. This same group that we brought together a dozen years ago and asked about sewer backups. How do we do that? Contributed a lot of these materials here, and credit them in there. But just so you know, this is a resource that can be very helpful. Train new operators. Here's what we're looking for when we do a manhole inspection. And there's a form in there to document your inspections. Many of you out there, if you're a little more sophisticated, you have an electronic system. You got an iPad or something, and all of those inspections are automatically put in there. It doesn't matter how we do it, how we document it. We just need to document it and do those inspections. Questions? I've been rambling through a bunch of stuff, so I know I put plenty of stuff in here. Here are some pages, selected pages out of there. Just kind of shows what we're looking for inspections in the various different parts of the manhole. Here's the sheet to document those inspections. You definitely can do those electronically as well. So once again, map your system, know what's going on, and really prioritize where we need to put our efforts, our money, and then take that action. And I won't plug Jeff to come up and talk about this, but your board, your city council, your whatever your governing body is, has a part in helping us take advantage of governmental immunity. So I'll just plug a webinar that Jeff did not too long ago. We called it Discretionary Function Immunity. Discretionary Function Immunity. Go onto our YouTube channel and watch that one. It's a really important subject to be able to take advantage of some of the protections that we have under governmental immunity. Have to prioritize. We have to identify what our challenges are, and we've got to bring that before our governing board. Okay, that's good enough. Limited description, and then go watch the video. Yeah. Okay. Make a plan. Your SSMP, Sanitary Sewer Management Plan, is your plan. It's a requirement in the state. We're going to hear more about that today. But put that in place. It'll tell us what to do about our sanitary sewer overflows. All right. What is your response plan? We have a plan, a written plan. If somebody calls up and says, there's sewage in my basement, what do I do? What do we do at that point? build a plan around that, and practice it, train on that with our staff. Take quick action. And in a minute, I'm going to say, don't admit fault, right? Don't admit that it was your problem that caused this backup. Some people think, well, if I go in and I start helping out, I move some furniture or something, and I'm not telling you to go move furniture, but maybe you're there and they're panicked. Oh no, it's my antique whatever is down there. Some people think by providing assistance, providing information, that we're accepting responsibility for that. That's not necessarily the case. We don't want you to go out there and say it's all our fault, we blew it, we'll pay for it, the insurance company will cover it. That's bad. Because we don't know. We don't know until all of the details come together. But if you can take quick action to help them out, to help them find a contractor to get their basement cleaned out and dried out, that can go a long way towards public trust. They will be appreciative of you, whether it's your fault or not, because you helped. And we also control costs, because the quicker we get on these things, the cheaper they are in the overall thing, and the happier the residents are going to be if a bad thing happens. Okay? Yes.
I just emphasize.
Yes.
It's great to be able to go in
and help out, and just say, if they ask, say, well, we're here because this happened and we just want to help and get this cleaned up. But others are looking into that. But if you say we're at fault and taking responsibility or anything like that, it doesn't change the legal situation. It doesn't commit your organization to liability. But what it does do is set them up so they expect you're paying. They don't file a claim with their insurer, and sometimes what that does is it either just makes them much more angry when they find out they were lied to, is how they'll look at it. But it could also create liability, because if work could have been done that mitigates the problem or prevents further problem from happening because it stays wet, because you didn't get there and tell them to get their insurance company are involved, or because they didn't, because you said you were going to take care of it, and that changes from a no fault situation to a liability situation for the added damage. So it's really important never to admit fault.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. Questions before I walk away from Jeff? Because we'll have him answer those. Yeah.
if you tell a customer, oh, so-and-so company is a good company and they'll come help you. No. Can't you get sued by every other company if you're a government entity, taking business away from the other people?
I'll respond to that. So the question is, if we refer to one disaster cleanup company, won't the other ones gang up on you and sue you for that? I've never actually seen that in the case of sewer backups, but that could potentially be a cause of action under state law. What we do, though, is we have a list of contractors that have been vetted through Travelers Insurance. They are the claims handling arm of the trust. We don't have any contracts with them. We just know that they will use the same estimating system, that they use the same standards that we do, and they're good to work with. They're not gougers. So we suggest you get a copy of that list, and I can provide that to you. Maybe I'll get some copies and bring it up here of the current list, and then you can hand it out and say, use any one of these companies. They have been vetted through our insurance. So you're not saying use them, but here's some that we know will treat you right.
Good question. Good question. Goes back to towing companies, right? That's a constant battle. Okay. How else can we help our residents out? Really be courteous, helpful. Sometimes some of our members have a card, so you have a backup, and it gives some quick guidance there. I think those are beneficial things that we can do to help them out without admitting fault, without bringing liability on itself. Your response plan should have phone numbers. Who needs to be contacted when this happens, so we get on that quickly. And guess who's part of that? The trust is really a part of that, because these adjusters need to, like we said, the quicker we can get on this, the better it's going to be for us and the homeowner as well. So get those adjusters there as soon as possible. By the way, I have no idea what happened, why that happened, but he dropped something down a hole. And apparently there's hydrogen sulfide and methane and all kinds of flammables in there, and it blows up on the guy. So cleanings, just a few thoughts from the guys that don't do sewer cleaning. Cleaning should be done on a schedule, and then prioritized for those hot spots, for those challenging areas. And there may be areas, and I realize that we have some of the folks in here. This is what you've done for your entire career. You know all of this stuff. We also have people in this group who are just getting involved with this. Cleanings might happen monthly in a hot spot. Does anybody have a more often frequency than that? Some places will have weekly cleanings, and you've got a belly, you've got a problem in the system. Okay. So what should your frequency be? Here's one guidance. Pretty much, if the section of sewer where a backup happens has been cleaned within the last year, we can just deny liability because you've been reasonable and prudent. You've done the things that you need to do, and we can defend a claim against that. For every year that you go beyond that, our ability to defend you from a claim goes down. So keep that in mind. And as we look at our frequency there, we're just over 3 years. I wouldn't be extending beyond 3 years to get through the system. Okay? There are some things that change that. The type of system that you have. We have some cities that have brand new systems, and they're all on the bench. They're all on the side hill. It's all plastic pipe, and it all zips downhill, and we really don't have a lot of problems in those systems. Well, knowing that and knowing history, then we can base our cleaning frequency on that. We have other systems out there that are out in the flats, and they're old systems, and they've got bellies, and they've got lots of challenges to deal with, and they probably need to be cleaning a lot more often than 3 years. Okay? And your claims will really tell you where you're at. If you're having claims, then we've got to reinvestigate our cleaning frequency. Okay? And also ask ourselves, are we doing it right? In years past, we've actually brought in some demonstrations, clear pipe showing how nozzles work as they go through the pipe. And we learned some things about speed and pressures and all of those things. But make sure your operators are trained on appropriately doing that. If we can run through a pipe and not clean it, even though it's gone through. Okay. Same things with our other inspection, whether we're TVing, take time to or put those on a schedule as well. All right. Generally, we like to see TV in the 3-year range, and then look at those hot spots and mitigate those things out there. One of the challenges that we see often is with fat soils and greases, and restaurants are normally the culprit on this, but sometimes it's a certain community where we have a problem with fat soils and grease, and so those inspections, and for some of you have a pre-treatment program in place. It's simple. We do this all the time. We inspect all of our businesses, and especially those restaurants. We check their grease traps, and we make sure their documentation, they're cleaning those things on a regular basis. And then we have other members of the trust who have not adopted an FOG program yet, and they're kind of hanging out there. And so if you find yourself in that group, talk to me, and let's make sure we put that in place. Community outreach. Oh, just at one point on that, on the community outreach when it comes to fat soils and greases. Many of you out there will put something in your billing that says this is okay to flush, this isn't okay to flush. those are tremendously helpful for people to be aware of what they can and can't flush, because always when a backup happens, oh, I didn't know I couldn't flush towels down my toilet. I didn't know I couldn't put rope down my toilet.
It's possible to make it multilingual.
And multilingual. Absolutely. Great point, Jeff. Train our operators, ensure that they're certified on that, and make sure that we are doing our frequency. Move right along. Have a root control program as well. All right. And have a plan around each of these potential problems. We realize your system vary widely. We go from the deserts in Washington County to high mountain alpine environments, and it's all very different. The different types of vegetation that you have. So some of you may deal with roots on a regular basis. Some of you never deal with roots. And so build your plans around your system and let's move forward. Found it. Documentation, and you guys will be you'll be glad when I one day retire from the trust and I stop talking about documentation. But at that point, Mike will be talking about documentation. If it isn't written down, it didn't happen. Document all of these things. As we look at a claim situation, whether it's a backup or whether it's a problem in a park, in one of your buildings, that documentation is critical. We've suffered some significant claims recently where our member just missed it. And I say we because we're all part of the same organization, just missed it. They weren't doing the inspections that they needed to do, and somebody became seriously injured because of that. And it cost us all a lot of money, and it cost the person a lot of pain. And so doing those inspections, documenting those things are just critical for us. I spend a lot of time talking about defending claims because money's important. But it also comes down to our reputation. Did you do what you said you would do? Did you do what your policies say? There are a lot of plaintiff attorneys out there that would love to make you look really bad. And if you don't have the documentation there, they're going to have a lot easier job making you look bad. Questions? Okay. Once again, if it isn't written down, it never happened. And here's the whole list, and I've gone a little bit long on this. We want to make sure that we have plenty of time for Jen. She says she's got it. She wants to to give us all the information that we need to stay in compliance and all of that. Like I said, for some of you, this is review. This is old hat. This is what you do day in, day out. For some of the rest of you out there, you may be new to this. Some of you may be in a situation now where you've had a backup and you're going, ooh, are we in trouble? Is the next one coming? What's really going on in that system? Let's work together and work on those things. Can all of us get better? Yeah, I believe that. Take a look at the sewer survey. Look at how your organization performed. The goal for that is that you look on there and say, whoa, we're not even hitting the average in the state. We should probably focus on that area. That's the goal of that, because if we take care of that low-hanging fruit, we're going to prevent those backups and bad problems, and nobody wants those. Questions, comments? Anybody mad at me? All right, good. Jeff, was there anything you needed to add? Okay. All right, folks, thank you so much for sitting through that. We're going to swap over to Jen. the clicker is right over there. Jen Robinson. There we go. Yes. Everybody knows Jen better than you know me, probably. In here, maybe.
I'm always amazed when I present of like a lot of you look familiar, but there are some new faces out there.
Yes, with the Department of Water Quality and with the state. All the information.
Perfect. All right. So, little bit about me. I actually became interested in wastewater when I was a junior in high school, going into my senior year. I know weird. Utah State has an awesome program where kids get to go up and learn about engineering. And I went up and I got interested in wastewater. Then I got to spend 2 years with Paul Krause, learning more about wastewater, mostly about lagoon systems, but a little bit about some other stuff. One thing I like to say is Paul used to share names with some of his stories. I don't share names. I don't think it's fair, but I think we learn a lot from each other based off of our story and what's happening in our industry. And so I will share stories. Paul used to tell me, you can share their names, it's public information. Yeah, but then they're not going to want to share it with me. That's one other thing about this. And I wander more than Jason, so good luck with whoever gets to follow me, because I do wander. So get back to my thought. We do learn a lot from each other. If we don't share those stories, either good or bad, we need to learn about that. One thing that we recently did with the Division of Water Quality is we did a kind of a shakeup in our organization. So in the near future, if anyone gets an enforcement action at the level of a notice of a violation, so an NOV, that will have my name on it with a point of contact if you have questions about the program. But if you have questions about the enforcement action, the NOV, or future information about that NOV, that will be someone else in our organization, which to me, I personally kind of like, because now I get to do more of an outreach kind of role. You'll still see my name on like warning letters and that kind of stuff, but as long as it's just kind of like a little bit of a compliance issue, we'll resolve those and move on. But I get to do more outreach, which is kind of nice. Acronyms. I'm with the government. I like my acronyms. Most of these, hopefully you guys understand or know about. Some of these probably closer to the bottom, the CCAP. Basically, these are plans that you need to have in place with your SSMP, so your Sewer System Management Plan. The one just above those S's, POTW. Earlier, Jason mentioned that we're doing this because of EPA. This is actually a state program. EPA requires you to notify us within 24 hours of any SSO that gets to waters of the state. Our program actually goes beyond that. We require you to do class 1s and class 2s, but that is a state program. So again, EPA, we basically told EPA get out of our state because we didn't like some of the things that they were telling us. And so we worked together with Heber came in. Dennis Gunn was part of that group, Central Valley, and a lot of other folks in our industry. We got together about 15 years ago and developed the Utah Sewer Management Program. Leland with Myers with Central, Davis was instrumental in this, but it is a state program. EPA does have a program out there, but really most of the time it's based off of enforcement. And a lot of that enforcement stems from combined sewers. Guess what we don't have in Utah? We do not have combined sewers unless there's a major flooding event, and then unfortunately stormwater gets in and our systems get overwhelmed. But that is not the intent of our sewer system. The intent of our sewer system is only to have sanitary sewer in them. And then we sometimes in some communities have a separate storm drain system. Again, separate. Awesome. I love it. If you ever want to learn more about SSOs or CSOs, so combined sewer overflows, look up Atlanta. Their sewer bills are in the 200s. It's crazy just for their sanitary sewer. Or, well, it's because it's got a combined system. But that's just for their collection. That is not for their treatment. We are so lucky in our state. Plus, we live in a desert, so it's kind of nice that way. But at the same time, on occasion, when it rains, it pours, and then we get some systems overwhelmed. But I like to say that's when Mother Nature causes problems with us, but we still need to ensure that we protect our residents, our environment, and everything else to ensure that we have plans in place to prevent problems. So, like I said, I think most of these you guys know, but the POTW one was what kind of got us started with this. The EPA tried to say that your NPDES permit, so how many actually have a Utah pollution discharge elimination permit? Come on, raise your hand, be proud. So those of you that have those, what EPA wanted to say is that that permit extended into your collection system. So how many in here have satellite systems connected to them, or potentially might in the future have satellite connection or systems connected to them? No, you guys don't. You own everything. Lucky you. South Valley Water Rec, you guys do. Some of you in this room are part of those communities. But again, would you want to be responsible for those connecting communities? Or your upstream satellite community that then flows into yours and potentially causes a problem in your community? Would you want us to consider that when we're trying to figure out what's going on with your system? I'm sure you would, right? And those are things that we take into consideration when you have issues. Those are things that EPA was like, no, you guys just need to have something in place to prevent SSOs, and it should be based off of this, and they have a permit. POTW extends that definition, includes your collection system. So they were trying to make that hook. And I'm in pre-treatment as well as I've been working in the collection system program since I started as an engineer with the Division of Water Quality. So since 2002, I've been working in the collection system program. In 2004, I got into treatment. So again, when we started doing the inspection of collection systems and EPA started saying we need to do more, I pushed back personally with my management support. I was saying, no, we're not using the definition because the satellite community you don't have control over if you have a permit, right? You don't have a control if they have a FOG program. You don't have control if they're not adequately documenting their information. So those permit holders were like, wait a second, we could be on the hook for a satellite community. We don't want this. And we agreed with you. So at the top, you'll notice rules. It's just that I'm taking it straight from there. Every collection system will be required to be basically covered by this program. We actually look at every federal and municipal system in the state of Utah. So even like I get to talk with the Park Service every once in a while. They'll have an SSO down in Bullfrog that just recently happened, and I get to talk with them about that. So everybody in the state of Utah that has a publicly owned treatment works or even a federally owned treatment work is covered by this. Now, you don't own the lateral or you don't own up to the property line, whatever you guys own, you need to ensure it's maintained. Luckily, most of the time when I talk with people in our state, you guys just own the main line. When I hear that, I'm like, because then you guys know exactly what you have. You don't have to worry about, okay, where's the property line? Where are these things? But everyone is covered. And yes, the permit is up for renewal this year. And so when that 90% popped up, I was like, actually, that really should be 100% because it's a state program. But at the same time, our enforcement group is looking at that as a potential non-compliance issue. So make sure you get those notice of intent in. In the past, I just say, okay, you got an SSO, let's evaluate the SSO and let's move on. Now they want to look a little deeper dive into that. So make sure you get those notice of intents in 60 days before November 30th of this year. So the permit requirements, essentially, SSOs are prohibited. Every SSO, we do not want an SSO coming out of anything that is its intended conveyance system. Does that mean that a homeowner's lateral is an SSO? Absolutely. Did some people not want that to be covered in this rule? Absolutely. But is that meaning that you guys take ownership of that lateral SSO? Absolutely not. Okay, no. Again, what do you own? And if that system, if you own it, then you need to report it. So, okay. So, I wanted to get to the definition. Let's go to this slide first. So, SSOs, we have two criteria. We've got a class 1 and a class 2. So once you realize you've got a mainline issue, you need to do kind of a little bit of an evaluation of what kind of basically SSO this is. Class 1s, they need to be reported within 24 hours, and they may require a 5-day report. Now, call me. I will evaluate it. If it is a class 1, we'll determine what needs to move forward with that. If it's a class 2, what I'll tell you is that it's a class 2, report it on your MWPP, so the Municipal Wastewater Planning Program is currently our annual report. That is all you need to complete at this time. It is due on April 15th. So, class 1, all of this fun stuff that is listed here, you need to let us know about. And then, again, you call me up. I've had one SSO where someone called me up and said, we had a burp into the sampling shack. I knew the industry because I'd been to that community because of being in the pre-treatment program. So I knew the industry, I knew the exact shack, and it was a burp. They said it had a wetted perimeter of whatever. And I said, what does the industry want you to do? I said, they put some bleach down and they moved on and they're fine with that. And I said, okay, to me, it is a class 1 per the definition, but I didn't require them to do a report on that one. That is one of the few times that I can remember not requiring a report. Most of the time, if you have a class 1, I want to see why it happened, what occurred, all of that kind of information. And then we would move on from there. The other thing about that one was that it was due to weather. And so it was a storm. And so I got that information. Yeah, let's just move on. Everything else, class 2, every SSO is reported on the MWPP. All right, let's go back to this. We already went over that. So we've got some general provisions in the collection system. Basically, you need to have capacity to handle all of your waste. You need to have properly trained operators. How many in here are on call or have been on call in the past? I can raise my hand because in the past I was on call. There's the expectation for you as either on call or a DRC, and you need to meet those, right? There are certain things that you can't do and certain things you can do. You have to be so far away from your community probably during that time, as well as you have to be able to respond. I had that same thing. Ironically, when do most of these things occur? To me, it always happened on Sunday. I would be in church and all of a sudden I'd get a call and I'd be like, oh, great. But before that even occurred, I already had a plan in place. My neighbors knew that if I got up and left, my husband was in the military And so they knew if Jen left, those boys were going home with them. I was grateful for those neighbors that were willing to do that, as well as my parents. Every once in a while stepped in and watched my kids. We had a plan in place, though. You need to have a plan in place. You are a DRC. What does that mean? Direct, responsible, in charge. But that means that if your operator that's on call needs to get a hold of you, you are available, right? So I have a story about that where someone shows up at someone's house and it's a sanitary sewer overflow issue where they're noticing issues in their home. And the guy that shows up is brand new and he's a water guy, operator. So they show up at the home and they say, basically, this is what's going on. And of course, the homeowner's like, hey, you better correct this because if I end up with poo in my basement, we're going to have problems, right? So the operator looks at the homeowner and says, I don't know what to do. Yes. Not only that, but it got back to the regulator. So that homeowner said, basically, I don't know if it's a mainline issue or if it's my lateral issue. We need to go pop those manholes in front of my home, above and below, to see how things are in the main line. The homeowner had to do that because that operator couldn't get a hold of anyone else in that community. Is that acceptable? Absolutely not. Seen a lot of people shaking their heads no. This is perfect. So we need to make sure that that operator that shows up at that home is trained, whether it's a new operator or an existing operator. But if they're on call and they don't know top manholes and they can't get a hold of you, and I find out about it, and that sewage ends up in the basement, that's really concerning to me. Not only that, I'm sure it's going to be very concerning to your insurance agent because you didn't have proper procedures in place to immediately address the mainline issue. Yes, it was a mainline issue. It was not a lateral issue. So again, make sure you're trained, make sure you're doing that. The other thing that's in this rule is that you have to have adequate resources. Are you guys looking at having adequate resources for your collection system? Do you feel like you have adequate resources for your collection system? I know recently my community increased our stormwater billing because they had an inspection and they didn't fare too well. So they looked at their resources and they adjusted and increased that bill for stormwater. Have you done that? Have you looked at that for your collection system, making sure that you have adequate resources? Because that will be something that if you have a problem and it's a severe enough problem, we might look into that. In the past, when we did some inspections, we did look at all of this information. We were looking at what EPA considered a medium-sized collection systems, which are from 10 MGD to 100 MGD. So in our state, those are the big boys, right? And they had really good procedures in place. So it was really good. And they did seem to have adequate resources to kind of handle those issues. Went over this, April 15th, MWP is due every year. Don't forget that. I did not put that date in there, but ironically it is tax date. So it's an easy one to remember. Another thing that needs to be, these are just, the next few slides are essentially what needs to be in your SSMP, so your sanitary sewer management plan. This is what you guys all should have. Again, that was another one of the concerning things that was brought into that survey was not everyone has an SSMP. You're required to, under the Utah Sewer Management Program, to have this in place. If you don't have one and you haven't completed an NOI, then you still are required to do it because we have a rule on the books. So whether you're permitted or not permitted, it's required. I like to say it's permit by shield. So what's nice is if you have submitted your NOI, you're shielded from the rule because all you have to meet is what I put in that permit. And I did draft the permit, so I can say I put in it. But if you don't submit an NOI, then you have to meet the rule. And it's a little bit more, there's more to it, and it's not as, I don't think it's friendly as the permit. I don't know, but you guys can feel that differently. But I would recommend looking at both of them, the rule and the permit. They are going to be going out to public notice in not too long. So I will send out to DRCs as well as to mayors is my hope. If, as long as I can get support from my management, to send that information out to you, you guys will have the opportunity to comment on that permit. So basically, you need in there who's involved in your sewer. Doesn't need to be all that detailed. I don't care. Just make sure you know who's involved in the sewer. And that's what that needs to be. A map. The map does not need to be something that you've got GIS. You do need to know where all your manhole lids are. You do need to know where all your pipes are, or have a plan to find them all in the future, right? Because I have heard from folks every once in a while, UDOT goes through and does a road project, and unfortunately they cover them up, but that's all good. So it can be a simple map. I actually went to one of the larger inspections we did, had satellite communities. One of those satellite communities, they just had a map like this on their wall, and all they did was with a highlighter, they would go through and they would highlight in a certain color what segments of line they did in what year. Is that adequate documentation? To me, it is. Do you need to make this cumbersome? No. But just like Jason said, if you don't have it documented, it never happened. Okay. And do you have to retain that map for a little bit? Yeah, you do. Until you get back to that segment of line that you did, whatever the frequency is. But again, that's documented. You know, you go and pop the manhole and look down in. My son did that one summer where he went and popped manholes, looked down in. I don't know what he was really looking for, but he took pictures and sent them back to someone and they took a look at them. But they had documentation because they had a picture of every one of their manholes, and then someone else was looking at it that could evaluate it to understand, like, okay, no, doesn't seem like we have anything that's unusual coming into that, or I don't know. So, but at the same time, you need to have that documentation that you're doing that. Your legal authority. We do have requirements in there that have the authority to prohibit it, things from coming into your sewer system. Now, if you do not have an approved pre-treatment program, then this is really needed, because if you have an industry that's causing issues with fat, soils, and grease, how are you going to go and rectify it? Or how are you going to basically say to them, you're causing problems, or basically the Division of Water Quality is now finding me, and I'm going to recoup that cost from you because you actually contributed it to it with your lack of maintenance of your restaurant. That's why this is important. The other thing is you want to make sure that you've got proper design and construction. Ensure that you've got access. That's a new-ish law, that you know where all the access points are in your sewer system. You want to limit things. Have the authority to inspect industrial users. And why is that important? So that you can go in and you can get an idea of what they're contributing to your system, and if they truly are not going to impact you. Now, a lot of folks will go into some industrial users and it will be like a metal finisher, and they'll be like, oh, we're just discharging, you know, like 10 gallons of waste. Well, that waste is actually categorical and it has to be permitted no matter what, no matter where you are in our country, that waste has to be permitted. So if you don't have an approved program, you need to let the Division of Water Quality know about that. But if you're just worried about restaurants, also want to go in there and make sure they're adequately maintaining their grease trap if they just have something under the sink or their interceptor. You need to make sure that you have the authority to do that before you enter. And then also, again, you can enforce on them. The one thing that I kind of do, which I'm sure some people might find odd, but when I go to a restaurant, if I don't see a grease interceptor as I'm walking in the restaurant, I often think, I'm going to one of my favorite Mexican restaurants and I'm not seeing a grease interceptor, or I'm going to wherever. What is this community doing with their fog? And are they just having under the sink cracks, which is fine. That works. And I've gone to a lot of small communities and that's what they have. But what you want to make sure is, like, when I went into the smaller community and I went and talked with the restaurant folks and I said, so how are you maintaining this grease trap? And the young woman who was kind of cleaning it every night, she says, this is what I do. And she walked me through, basically, I get a shop vac, I decant the water, I put the grease into our black barrel in the back, and then I make sure and fill it up with water again. But it's nice and clean before the next shift that she works. And I was like, perfect, and exactly what I wanted to hear. Because she knows what she needs to do. The other thing she realizes is that if she doesn't do it every night, it gets sticky, it stinks. And so she knows. And this one is right in there, like in the kitchen, and it does get odorous because it was a Mexican restaurant. Went to another Mexican restaurant. They had a really big one. I was like kind of shocked. Because most of the time I see these little things that are about like this, and then they clean them out every night. But this one had a really good size grease trap. They had not opened that thing since it was installed, and supposedly it was installed about 5 days before the doctor showed up. So they're like, we don't know how to do it, and so we don't even know how to open the thing. The plumber that put it in was supposed to come back and tell us how to clean it and maintain it. And so what do? I get on Google on my phone, put the model number in, and sure enough, it comes up. Basically, there's a bunch of screws, pop off the top, and then you maintain it. Well, luckily we did it before lunch started. We were there about 10 a.m. because we popped that thing open and we realized why there was bleach all over on top of the counter, because they were dumping bleach down the sink because it was odorous. I felt really bad for the gentleman that was working either with Pepsi or Coke. I can't remember which soda it was, but I'm sure he was not accustomed to smelling that kind of odor like I was, and it took me back. And I was like, oh, that's not good. But that guy, I'm not kidding, he wanted to get out of there quick because it was bad. It was pretty nasty. But making sure that they know how to maintain those. But if you don't have the authority to go into that restaurant, you don't have the authority to make sure that they're maintaining them. You need to ensure that you can do that. And then if they deny you access, then you can go back and then work through those type of things. Most of the time, I just say, if you're in a small community without a pre-treatment program, call me up. We'll get it. We'll make it happen. But because most of the time, if you're in a larger city, they understand that you need to have access and that you have the authority to get in. But just make sure before you go into someone's property that they grant you access. I went to one restaurant with a small community and they just walked in to where the grease trap was in the basement. No, that's not okay. You guys need to talk to the restaurant opener, make sure that they're going to allow you in. And I like to do it every time, personally, because of the fact that maybe one day they're like, wait a second, we've got stuff going on. But again, if you've got concerns about your collection system, you should be able to get in. How am I on time? Oh, wow. I'm good. So fog programs, you are required to have one if you have over 2,000 connections. Again, going back to the survey that the trust did, You do not, if you have over 2,000 connections and you don't have a fog program, you need to have one. I had a conversation yesterday with a community where they said, no, we don't have one. And I said, you don't have anything? No, we don't have anything. I said, well, what does your ordinance say about restaurants? Well, this is what it says. What does your building inspector do when they go out to check these restaurants? This is what he does. And I said, so do you have a fog program? Oh, wait, yeah, we do. You have it written down. No, we don't. You don't? You just told me that you have stuff written down. Oh, you have an adequate fog program. No, we don't. Okay, we got there. Most everybody has some type of a fog program. Is it adequate? Maybe, maybe not. But when a regulator comes in to talk to you, realize that when you are being inspected, you need to make sure that you answer the questions. But at the same time, I'm going to do follow-up questions because I'm also doing outreach. I'm not there to find issues with your program most of the time. If I'm there for an inspection, then I am kind of trying to find stuff. But at the same time, I'm also there to educate. Like I said, it's really nice that we have this separation now because I can go out and make sure that you understand you have stuff on the books. If you have gone and done some of this, the authority to inspect prohibit industrial users from discharging certain things into your sewer system, part of your fog program. Making sure that you have design and construction criteria for your restaurant, part of your fog program. So again, answer the questions, but think about it and then also be able to say, maybe it's not adequate yet. We're going to get there though, right? And that's what the community said. We're going to work on it and we're going to get there. And that's the expectation. One thing I forgot to mention, every one of these pictures in the presentation are from Utah. So it's kind of fun. So the SSOs were actual SSOs that had occurred that I either was on site for or someone else was. But this is a TV crew that we did an inspection of. And so those are folks working in the industry. Another reason why I wasn't happy with some of the stuff that was occurring with some of the inspections we did early on was the fact that EPA had a bar. Did they have a rule to set that bar? No, they didn't. And I always tell people, and Tad's probably heard this before, I always think about if I was the permittee, what would I do? And so I always sit back and I think like, if I was in your shoes and someone told me that you had to clean 50% of your sewer system yearly, what would you guys say? Is that appropriate? I grew up in the foothills not far from here. And basically I said, Bountiful, where I grew up, may have not needed to clean all that much up on that foothill. Now maybe down when it sloped kind of leveled out, maybe, or maybe the communities below us, those satellite communities, were dealing with all the stuff that we flushed down our toilet. But Bountiful and North Salt Lake on these benches, they probably don't need to clean that often. Now we have new technology out there as well that can stretch maybe your cleaning cycles as well. You guys have to figure those things out. But I won't set your bar. And like I said, with EPA, that was the other reason why we did this, is because when we went out and did an inspection, EPA reviewed all of those reports before we sent them out. They actually went out with us on the first inspection we did. And then the follow-up ones, which this is one of the follow-up ones, we sent the report. They weren't with us, but we would send the report. They would review the report and then make comments. One of the comments was, we believe that an adequately maintained collection system is cleaned 50% every year. And I said, community hasn't had an SSO in X many years. And it had been, I want to say, over 5 years. And I think it was even beyond 10, but off the top of my head, this is over 10 years ago. So my memory doesn't serve me well. But I did. I said to EPA, I'm not going to do that because they knew every hot spot in that service area. They knew every little belly. They knew drop locations. They knew where they had roaches. They had all fun stuff where I was like, ew, we have roaches in Utah. And they're like, oh, we got roaches. And in the sewer system, I know that we have roaches. I've worked in restaurants before, so I know we do. But at the same time, I didn't realize that they like being in our sewer systems. And I thought about it and I'm like, that makes sense. But before that, I didn't really think about it. But they knew all of this because they had an awesome maintenance program. They really did. So again, I put myself in your shoes. And at one point, I wanted to be an attorney until I realized that I couldn't ethically defend everyone I worked for. And that's where I was like, I don't want to. I want to be an engineer. And then I decided to be a regulator because then I could tell you guys how to fight with me. Or not fight with me, discuss information with me, right? But again, that's what I did with EPA, is I had a discussion of why I was not going to put that requirement in that report. And basically told EPA if they were going to require that of that community, then they needed to write that letter because it was not going in my report. I was lucky I had management that supported me. Do we always have management that supports us? Not always, but I did. I currently do. I have in the past, which is really nice. But if you don't, that becomes challenging. But luckily I did, and they did support, and we did put that report out without saying anything about their O&M because they had a good program. And in my mind, they had a great program. So they were training their staff. They would go out and kind of go over things. Jason also talked about that. Going over and whether it's a tabletop exercise of what you guys do in the field, or if you go out and you just exercise and you basically call up, someone, you have one of the operators, have it be an SSO at their house. And you go to their home and then you go through what would you do if the homeowner does this, and be that homeowner that you've all probably dealt with of, I've got poop in my basement, you better figure it out before I call an attorney. Go through those things. Safety to me is a huge issue. I have gone out, and that was one thing when that homeowner told me about that experience where they went and popped the manhole in front of the home. They said, well, when you pop that manhole, did that operator test the environment of that manhole before they popped it? No, they didn't. They didn't have a meter test. Not only that, but it was a drinking water person, so they didn't probably realize that they needed to do it. But the homeowner also didn't think about it. Now you guys probably have a good indication of which manholes you need to test and which ones you don't need to test to ensure that the environment's not going to be harmful. But I don't care. I'm going home, my family, the way I left them. So when I show up at UDOT and I ask UDOT to pop that manhole for me to inspect some of their area, and I stand back away from that manhole and they're all circled around it, and they turn around and look at me and say, Jen, are you going to look in? You guys didn't test that environment. You guys work in a shop. I don't know what you put down that shop floor that's now in that manhole. I'm going to wait a second, see if any of you guys call in and call 911. It's funny until someone dies. But at the same time, and that was the other conversation I had yesterday with the wastewater plant people, is I'm like, how often are you carrying around your safety devices check the environment. Are you checking every manhole? Not really. Like, okay, it's your choice. But we had someone in Region 8 pre-treatment program in Colorado. They went in to do a sample, and it was a typical go in. It wasn't confined space. Went in, take that sample, whatever that facility was doing, he got hit with something. And he still isn't right today. I went in, huge room, chemical storage. I went in, they had an open canister of ether. I got hit with ether. Every chemical storage room I go into now, I almost get an immediate headache. I got exposed. I got lucky. And the people I was with, they don't have any issues. And I'm noticing less and less, like I can be in a chemical storage room for longer and I'm not getting the headache as quickly. But that happened 15 years ago. And it was a very large chemical storage room. Go home to your family the way you left them. Use those equipment. Use it however often you want to. But don't get lazy and don't go home to your family because you were lazy. All right, let's go on to a different topic. Jen's on her soapbox because Chad would probably. But now I can't get it to move. All right, we're gonna go up here. Maybe it's trying to tell me that I'm done. I know I've got more slides. And even the arrow's not working. Enter's not working. And like you said before, I can't. Oh, maybe that one. There we go. Yeah. So kind of talked about this. Make sure that you've got installation requirements through a response plan. Practice it. Like I said, make sure that you're responding. Know what the criteria is for a class 1 SSO so that you're notifying us. As far as other agencies, I would talk with your health department and let them know, okay, if we have an overflow, when do we need to notify you? Notifying others downstream. We've had large SSOs where basically it wasn't really an SSO. It was a mainline from a satellite community going into a waterway for several days. And we've told downstream users in Nevada about that because they had intake water that was potentially going to be having raw sewage going into it. And it was diluted because of the storm in the area, but it was still occurring. And then again, make sure you do that training. If you have over 2,000 connections, you also need to do this requirement, which is just making sure that you have the system evaluation capacity for your system. Again, over 2,000 connections, and you're just looking at your flow into your collection system. This could be your master plan. You may already have something on the books that meets the needs of this. So just realize you don't need to go out and do something new, but you do need to look at the documents in-house, make sure that you have looked at it for your master plan, and when was it last updated, and then is that still on track? When you did that master plan for your collection system, are you on track with how many connections you're getting into your system, or is it over or under, and do you need to reevaluate it sooner than you thought? Monitoring, make sure that you are looking at it. You have to look at your SSMP annually and assess it, update it as needed. You also are supposed to do internal audits of the program, just looking at it again. And then you need to do public outreach for it. This is one thing I fought for. It does still have PE in the role, if I remember correctly, but who is the most qualified personnel to be doing your SSMP? Is that a professional engineer that doesn't work for your community? Good answer, good shake. I had someone say no. No, it is not. It is you. It's those of you that are working in your system. That is who needs to be doing it. And even if you have a lot on your plate, we have a model program. Most of the engineers are aware of this and they are utilizing it, and you're paying a lot for it. So realize that. And I have gotten some of these back where there's the parts that need to be filled in that your community hasn't filled it in. So again, those are things in the SSMP that your engineer did for you, but they're waiting for you to complete that part of it. How often do you clean? How often do you TV? What are your hot spots? Can your engineer tell you that? A contract engineer? No, they can't, really. The other thing I like to say is, if my frequency of cleaning my community sewer system is once every 3 years, personally, I would put it at once every 4 years. I gave myself a year leeway for those major crisis years. So if you had a big flood and you've got a lot of sediment in your collection system, you have time to go and evaluate that. You've got new technology where maybe now you don't need to clean once every 5 years or 4 years or 3 years. So you put that, you make that modification and you say, we're going to clean based off of this new technology, and we're going to do systematic cleaning versus cleaning on a frequency. That's up to you guys to decide. How do you word it to ensure that when someone, an inspector, comes into your community and says, are you doing this? And you say, well, actually, we're now using this new technology. So no, we're not cleaning every 5 years. And I'm like, well, that's a no, that you're no longer meeting what you put in your SSMP. And in all honesty, you are now setting the bar. That is your bar that you set. If you're not meeting it, then actually you're in violation of our rule, and that's an issue. But don't set your bar in such a way. And again, make sure that it meets your needs. Audit your SSMP. The other part of this is public outreach. Whether it's an industrial user, you're providing public outreach, or if it's your community, letting them know about SSOs and the impact of what they do in their home and how it impacts your system. I went recently to my sister-in-law's house. She lives just outside of Wichita, Kansas. And my husband went into the kitchen one morning and sees her putting coffee grounds down her garbage disposal. And my husband says to her, don't let Jen see you do that. And then, of course, he comes out and outs her to me. But then I have a conversation with her of like, don't use your garbage disposal, like at all. And she was putting coffee grounds down there, grease, eggshells, all of these things that we need to do public outreach for. And sometimes people will listen and sometimes people won't. But the thing is, I have to admit, when my community sends out a mailer and I read it all the way through because I think it's entertaining sometimes. But one time it was very entertaining to me because I was actually the permit writer for the discharge permit that my community flows into at the time. And in that newsletter, it says, if we don't do an upgrade to our sewer system, we're going to end up with $100,000 fine per day. And I just start laughing. We have the authority to do that as an agency. In all honesty, we could have fined that community or that wastewater treatment plant $100,000 per day because of all of the effluent violations that if they blew them all out, we could do that, but we never would, in all honesty. So that's why I got to giggle out of it. But at the same time, could you end up, because of a sanitary sewer overflow with the fine. How many in here have that are willing to say they have? I don't know. I know that I know there's been a few, less so recently, but there have been a few communities that have gotten NOVs and have gotten fines. Again, we don't like to talk about it, but most of those fines are around $2,000 to $10,000. So could your community get fined? Yes. The other thing is can we put dollars to cleaning and say, basically, we're finding a lot of grease, we're finding a lot of wipes, we're finding a lot of eggshells, we're finding feminine products in our sewer system. And can we let our community and our residents know, especially if it's a focused area, hey, we're coming out to your home quite often and cleaning the sewer system, and this is how much it costs. Unfortunately, the entity that told me the story is not here, but there was an entity that went out and they were cleaning a manhole on a regular basis because of the fact that it ended up having a lot of feminine products in that manhole. There were about 5 houses because it was a cul-de-sac that fed into it. One day, one of the residents came out and said, oh, you guys are here a lot. And the guys kind of explained what was going on. Ironically, that dad had a bunch of young women in his home. He realized that that was probably them, brought those young women out, said this needs to stop immediately. Ironically, the problem went away. So again, could you do a mailer when that happened? Because in all honesty, I was a young woman at one time. And had my dad done that in front of some of you guys, I would have been so beat red and I would have been so embarrassed that, yeah, that would have never happened again. Because more than likely that dad knew that it was his home that was contributing to that problem. So, like I said, I have stories and they're kind of good. If I get too close on time, just let me know. I don't know how much time I have. Reports, this is just information that you need to complete. For your SSMP and your CCAP, I do not want these submitted to us. Not only that, but if you submit them and I get bored, which won't happen for probably the rest of my time with the division because I've got enough on my plate. But if I were to get bored, or if I was like, it might be entertaining while I'm on the elliptical and I want to read something, to read it in my free time. And then I'll give you comments back. So, but they don't need to be submitted to us. What needs to be submitted to us is that your governing body has approved it. That must be done. Do you think that's important for your governing body to understand what you guys are implementing in the sewer system? Absolutely. Not only that, but I've had operators come up to me and say, thank you for doing this program. My community was about to cut our budget for sewer for something else, and I was able to use my SSMP to ensure that we had the funding that we needed to follow our program. Beneficial, right? So when you're looking at cutting budget, you can say, wait a second, we're still getting sewer bills in. And we also need to maintain this. We need to clean it. We need to TV it. And we need to do it at the frequency stated in our program. Go ahead.
This goes back to that discretionary computer. Passing that plan up through, they know what is the problem. That affects liability.
Yep. So the trust just mentioned for those that are online that maybe weren't able to save that, but this protects you in the event that you have an SSO. Not only that, but it protects your community, because then everybody's, what I kind of heard, everyone's on board with this. Your city council, your board, you guys. Not only that, but then you go to your community and you tell them again, like, hey, we can't do this, because if not, there's this mean lady at the state that has even meaner people that are going to come after us if we have an SSO. So again, I don't have to do enforcement anymore. I love it, but we have other people that do still do it. Documentation. If you don't document it, it never happened. You need to make sure if you do report anything or have to report it, indicate who you reported it to. You know, I don't work 24/7, 365 like some of the DRCs. So just make sure if you do call up the Division of Water Quality, adequately get everyone's contact information that you reported it to, so that if we do have any issue with communication, that we have all of that. You need to make sure that whoever is signing reports has the authority to sign those. So certification of notification for your reports, essentially, that goes, I would put that back up on to the city council or the mayor. Most of the time it's either the mayor or the city manager, but then they know what's going on with your collection system. They're signing the MWPP, certifying to the best of their knowledge that everything's true and accurate. So you're providing that information to them, and then they're signing it. Any questions up to this point? I've been talking, had a couple. Oh, good. All right, we're going to go through pre-treatment, approved programs, delegated programs, de-delegated programs, unapproved programs, because I oversee the pre-treatment program as well. Realize that not everyone, every once in a while I hear like everyone needs an approved pre-treatment program. Please don't do that to me. I have enough work that I don't need all of you guys to be submitting local limits, approved program documents, and legal authorities to me, and then oversighting everybody in our state. So anybody that tells you you should get an approved pre-treatment program, what they are actually talking about is everyone, whether you're required to or not, based off of the Utah Sewer Management Program, should have a FOG program. If you have a restaurant in your community, you should have a FOG program. Again, you've got some regulator out there looking to see if there's manholes, looking like there's an interceptor in front of that restaurant. FOG program protects you from having grease in your collection system. So I go out and do presentations every once in a while, and I always find it interesting when people say to me, as an engineer, the solution to pollution is dilution. As an engineer, it is not, nor is it ever. The solution to pollution is treatment. Under the Clean Water Act, we do not allow for dilution to be considered. So if you hear from a restaurant or even a homeowner that, you know, I just turn the hot water on and it goes down the drain and it ends up into your collection system, or they're using emulsifiers in their kitchen of that restaurant, where does the grease end up? In your collection main line, which then you're going out and cleaning more frequently, right? So is that the solution? No. Is that adequate treatment? And an emulsifier, is it adequate treatment? No, because it's pushing it from that source into your line, down that stream, and eventually it's going to take your line. This is my understanding. Unapproved pre-treatment programs, basically, if you do not have an approved program or you don't have a permit holder like South Valley Water Reclamation Facility that you're covered by, then you don't have an approved program as either a satellite or as a discharging permittee, then you come under my authority. So every POTW, so publicly owned treatment work, has a pre-treatment program, whether you have an approved program or if you come under the oversight by the Division of Water Quality. We have had 2 systems in our state that initially got the pre-treatment program before I got into pre-treatment. They were adequately controlling their industrial users, and then we pulled back those programs and they continued to adequately control them, and so they haven't had to have an approved program. But those industries in those communities are still covered by pretreatment. They're just not covered by the local POW, they're covered by the Division of Water Quality. So if you've got an industry in your community that's causing issues and you don't have an approved pretreatment program, or if you have an industrial user that wants to come into your community and they're telling you they want to send you 250 or 2,500 milligrams per liter of BOD, is that a concern? Maybe, maybe not. Depends on the capacity of your system, right? But when you go through the calculation, it becomes interesting. When you say, okay, I've got an industry that wants to send me 2,500 milligrams of wastewater of BOD concentration, and they're going to flow at 50,000 gallons per day, so 0.05 mgd. How many ERUs are those? Well, because I'm in pretreatment and I love math, because my mom was a math teacher, my dad was an engineer, so ironically, I'm an engineer. It pays well, better than teaching. And I didn't want to go into statistics because that's where you make money in math. Again, ethics, that problem. But, so how many ERUs is that? So looking at state rules, essentially, we put in our rules that 100,000, or not 100, 100 gallons per day per capita, so per person in a home, which most of the time we say there's 4 people in a home. Sometimes you have more, sometimes you have less, but because I want to make it easy math, an ERU to me is 4 people. So basically their flow, they're taking up 125 ERU, if I did my math right. Hopefully I did. That would be embarrassing if I didn't. But when we look at their load, again, I took easy math. Basically, when we talk about loading for BOD, we take it at 0.22 pounds per person. So this is a little bit more than 4 people in a house is what I'm calculating as an ERU. But it makes really easy math, right? 1 pound becomes 1 pound for an ERU. So that industry that wants to give you 2,500 milligrams of BOD at 50,000 gallons per day just took 1,000, over 1,000 ERU, if my math, hopefully it is. Now, same industry comes to you, or similar industry comes to you and says, I want to do a similar thing, but I want to put pretreatment in. So they lower their impact and they essentially say, we're going to give you what we would consider as an engineer, high strength BOD. And to me, high strength BOD for a municipal system is 250 milligrams per liter. And then we get close to being 1-for-1 ERU is what that business is taking up. But again, if you don't do the calculation and your economic development folks just say, hey, they're going to bring us jobs, they're going to bring us economy, they're going to bring us sewer fees. And again, if you're not looking at the ERU, could your community be subsidizing that business? There's possibility. Because if you don't look at the ERUs they're taking from your system, they're taking homes away from you. And your residents are picking up the slack because you're not recouping those costs. So just a little bit of an education on that. And then also, we really should, like I mentioned, my sister-in-law, make sure that people know what they can and cannot flush. Let them know that we can't accept these things into our community. And make sure that they don't flush things that we don't want in it. There's a lot of good information for communities to send out to residents of what not to flush, what to flush. And basically, I think they're now calling it the 4 Ps: pee, poop, and puke, and toilet paper. Yeah. So, but we only want toilet paper. We do not want tissue, and we don't want flushable wipes down our sewers. So just making sure that people understand. But my favorite stories are always those that I get from communities when I hear about people flushing wipes to the extent that they plug their own lateral. That actually happened in a small community, because I'm sure that homeowner was telling all of their neighbors about don't use flushable wipes because they really don't flush, because they ended up having to dig up their lateral and repair it because the homeowner had flushed so many wipes that it caused a huge problem in their lateral. Luckily, it didn't go into the sewer system. If you have any questions, and I know that I can see lunch back there, so we'll go ahead and do that unless there's anything else. Or are there any questions online? All right, perfect. All right, thank you.
So thank you so much, Jen. We did not coordinate our topics, and I was amazed at how much the topics dovetailed with each other. We're talking best practices, trust angle. This is how you avoid financial losses. It's how you avoid problems, and it really dovetails with what Jennifer talked about today. We really appreciate her taking time to come in and present on that, and we appreciate you for coming and participating in this. We hope we gave you some information that will benefit you as you go forward and do your work out there. We appreciate everybody out there in Zoom land as well. Let's have lunch. Have a great day, folks.